Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Willie Nelson is 87 today. The great son of Ohio is celebrating his 87th birthday, so we want to salute Willie Nelson. I'm joined by the guy who owns the headline of the morning. Steve Holland of Reuters had an exclusive interview with the president yesterday, and the headline is Trump says China wants him to lose his bid for re-election. Steve Holland joins me now. Follow him on Twitter at SteveHolland1. Welcome back, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great, Hugh. Doing great, and thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm
It was
so glad to have you on. I think of you when I watch the press briefings of Kipling's If poem. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs, you're always on point. You ask questions I want asked, and I thank you for being a pro's pro. Tell us about yesterday. When did you find out you were going to go in and sit down with the president, and how did that work out?
well. This had been originally planned for last November, and that's how these things get delayed. But when the new press secretary came in, Kayleigh McEnany, I think she's wanting to get more of these sessions going. So she and someone made her aware that I'd been often delayed, so they decided to do me first. And your column, I'm sure, helped, and thank you for so much for that.
Well, I
Um,
actually don't think it did because you don't invite people in on a spur of a moment. Maybe the president does, but I think he just generally goes to you first because you're fair. So, about what time of the day did Kayleigh say we're going to do that interview, Steve Holland?
Oh, a couple of days ago, I would say back on we tried to do it on Monday, and they were going to do it on the phone, and then they offered the chance to come in and talk to him, and that's such a unique experience being in the Oval Office that I thought if they could wait and schedule me then, it would be great. I had to be tested for the virus before going in because you can't be very close to him without proof that you're negative for the virus. So we did that. Went in about 6:30. He's he's tired, but he's in a solid mood. And I had a lot of questions about China, and so I was asking him about that. And we're wanting to know what about this investigation and where the virus originated, and what are the consequences for China because they're clearly thinking of something. And then he just sort of blurted out that China wants me to lose the election, and I thought, okay, there's my lead
There's your
Democrat.
lead. Now,
Yeah.
Steve, for the benefit of the Steelers fans and young would-be journalists, when you get word you're going to go into the Oval, I've only done that twice with W, and sat down and had an interview and a conversation, and they were off the record. You're on the record. How did you prepare? Because you went like a torpedo for midships for the most important issue, which is the United States and China. About of all this stuff, the virus is raging, but what the president can tell you about is that relationship. So how did you prepare to put that question down?
Well, we have a running list of questions that we have for day to day because we have so many opportunities to talk to him. And I consult with my editors and particularly our foreign policy people who are very good on these subjects, and they offer some suggestions. But we have kind of it's almost rote the way we do it. We have just a running list of topics and things that we know that he hasn't actually uh, dealt too deeply on, and so we go back to those and see if there's any news. And I must say I went really hard trying to get him to talk more about the North Korea situation with Kim Jong Un uh, somewhere. We're not sure where, and he said, quote, I know everything, but then I couldn't pull anything out of him. I tried over and over again to get. He knows what's going on with Kim, but he's just not able to say because of intelligence reasons, I assume.
Now, how adamant was he? Because sometimes in print you miss. I wish they'd let C-SPAN in with you. I don't know if you guys would reject that or not. I don't know what the rules are, but when he says they will do anything they can to make him lose, that suggests, of course, that they will do on the internet what Russia did on the internet times a million, right? They will meddle with our election. Is he afraid of that?
Well, I didn't ask that, and that's a very good point. I wish I had asked that, but I was more um, inquisitive about what are the consequences. Are you going to raise tariffs? Are you going to write just just ask China to forgive debt to pay for our stimulus that we've had for the pandemic? But that's a good
Interesting.
point you raised there.
Well, again, you'll hopefully he'll have you back. 'Cause you always get the question. Tell our audience again. This is a little play-by-play color. I've only been in the Oval a few times. Back in the Reagan days, we were allowed to take people in there for tours, but the president wasn't there. I've only been in to meet Reagan briefly, Bush a couple of times. And we sat in a very structured order. People, reporters on the couch, someone gets the right hand chair. I got it, the left hand chair, the president, and then there's another person. Bennett was on the other side. Where were you sitting? Across the desk from him or next to him on the couch in the chair?
Right across the desk from him, and they've got the chairs separated a little bit to provide a little bit more distance. So I'm right across the. He's sitting behind the resolute desk as he so often is, and I'm at one of the chairs away, facing him. And then I've got Hogan Gidley, the deputy press secretary, on my right, and Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, on my left. And we had Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, floated in for a while, and I got to meet him. But Hugh, the one of the remarkable things is it's very special for me is that they talked about doing this interview in the map room, which is in the actual White House residence, where they have these maps, World War II maps on the wall. It's a famous room, and I thought, okay, I've never done that before. But then they decide, you know what, he wants to do it in the Oval. So the president comes out, and he and I both walk down that famous colonnade to the Oval Office, and I'm thinking, world leaders have walked on this colonnade. I have no business doing this with the president, but it was a very special moment for me.
Now, did you get 10 minutes, 15 minutes? How long were you with the president?
30 to 35.
Holy smokes!
Yeah, he was very gracious with his time.
Now, Steve, from my experience on the radio, I've only interviewed him on the radio and on the debate stage. He is rather discursive, right? You can cover a lot of ground in 30 minutes.
Yes.
How many Q&As did you get in there?
Oh, I had a list of like 3 or 4. I had like 3 or 4 pages of questions, and I got through most of them. I didn't get through everything. I left some stuff on the table, but I got through most of it. Sometimes he can go on and on about a subject. He can drift, but he was on point yesterday, and I got through a lot of the political stuff, response to what's going on in the States, extensive about China. No, it was a solid discussion.
Is it all on the record, and did you get to tape it, and are you going to be able to release it?
They don't want me to release the audio, and he does. He will stop himself and say off the record XXXX, and then you go back and you serve back on the record, and he's very happy to do that. So it makes it a little bit tricky, and you got to be careful with the transcription too, because you don't want to put out that. There's not the off the record stuff is not that earth shattering, but it's I have to abide by those rules. So
those rules are otherwise you'll never be back. I mean, those are the rule, and other ones won't come. Now, I am of the opinion, as you mentioned, a post column. He ought to be doing this a lot. He's better one-on-one than in the OK Corral shootout of the briefing room. And I know you're not going to speak against having more briefings. You're a journalist. You want more briefings. But do you think it's a better use of his time to spend one-on-one with a journalist who wants just the facts, or to do the OK Corral stuff?
Well, probably a mix is pretty good. He takes more questions than any president I've ever seen, and most of them take a lot. But I've quite enjoyed the briefing room sessions because I've been arguing for him to come to the briefing room for a long time, and he had wanted to, but the staff had talked him out of it. But then we saw that things got a bit overheated in some of the last few weeks there, and the staff rethought it and decided it better for him to do Q&A in a little different setting and do these sessions with reporters, which I think I'm probably the first of many. He'll do.
I want him to stick with the straight news people like you. I honestly have no idea what your politics are, and we traveled to Israel and Turkey together. I was telling the audience earlier, you were the nice guy on the plane, along with a couple other people, to make sure I didn't, I almost managed to delay us in Ireland, but nevertheless, for a rookie, you were very nice to me. My question, Steve, is: are there more stories to come from this interview? Now, it's just a matter of journalistic practice. Did you use your big lead? Trump says China wants him to lose his bid for reelection. Is there another one coming?
Well, we had another story that just hit the wire just about an hour ago about, and this is a story we've been working on for a couple of weeks about the oil deal that the president negotiated with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia and President Putin of Russia. And remember that the Saudis had been flooding the world with oil in some sort of tiff with Russia, and it was killing the U.S. oil industry. And the president interceded, made some phone calls to the Crown Prince. Our story is about this whole process, and I was able to get him on the record to address some of these issues.
Oh, wow.
The question was, did he tell the Crown Prince that the United States would pull U.S. forces out of Saudi Arabia if he didn't stop flooding the world with oil? And I think the actual reality is there was so much pressure from lawmakers in Congress who Kevin Cramer of North Dakota, senator, had introduced a bill calling for the U.S. to pull forces out. And I think the president was able to bring this up and say, hey, look, I'm under a lot of pressure here. You can see what's happening on Congress. They're going to force my hand, so help us out here. And the Crown Prince relented. So that's one of the offshoots of the interview. There may be a couple other little things I do, but the most of it's out on the wire already. We tend to move pretty quick if we can.
I am going to go read that right now. Steve Holland, thanks for making time for me after a big scoop. The headline out there already is Trump says China wants him to lose his bid for re-election by Steve Holland. Follow Steve on Twitter. Steve Holland, for the Steelers fans, that's HOLLAND 1, the number 1. Steve Holland 1. He's like QB1. Steve, thank you. Keep asking those great. If you can keep your head as Holland does, you're a good reporter. Thank you, Steve.